In today's lesson, we are going to look at applications of winnowing, tichita 0 in on grain separation. So grain separation is an application of winnowing which we want to study. Now looking at grain separation as an application of winnowing, chatiri kuda kutanga kuita kutodzokera kuwinnowing yacho. So the new fact we want to learn today is the word winnowing. So let us put it in quotes. The word winnowing derives from an Old English word What is this Old English word? The Old English word is Winnowing, and this word means to separate a mixture by wind. Saka, to separate a mixture by wind. We are going to take note that English borrows from many other languages, and yataita panapa tatarisa what they refer to as the etymology. Etymology, it's more like studying the origins of a word. So the word winnowing comes from an Old English word, winnowing, which means to separate a mixture by wind. So contained in the definition of the word itself, we have what winnowing is all about. Now, the second fact we want to look at panapa is there was a man called Andrew Roger. Saka, Andrew Roger is the one who invented the first winnowing machine. Because it are in an age of automation where machines are used to increase the efficiency of work, efficiency in terms of cutting down on the need of labor, and also preserving or conserving time. So Andrew Roger invented the first wind winnowing machine. Where did he do so? In Scotland. When did this happen? In the industrial age, that is 1737. So let us just see this Andrew Roger guy so that we can familiarize what we are learning. So this is the Andrew Roger guy who invented the first wind winnowing machine, Scotland, 1737. By Scotland, we are not referring to this football club which is infamous in Zimbabwe nowadays. We are actually referring to a country which is in Europe. So if you want to research more about this guy and how he came about this invention and how it improved agriculture, how this invention improved the quality of agricultural produce, you can read a little around this guy. Now what we want to do is we want to remind ourselves more like tiri kuda kunyora this particular point. Winnowing can be done manually. Kupepeta kunoita vana amai nanambuya vedu neazvanzi dzedu nesu zvakare, because hakuna basa rinonzi iri nderemukomana iri nderemusikana, broadly speaking. So winnowing can be done manually, and this will be through traditional means. Some traditional winnowing machines. And so we are using traditional means. We can just give an example like winnowing fork. It already referenced even in biblical scripture, or through machines. Ndiochi, automation. And this is also what is called automation. Saka we have two options when it comes to winnowing. It's either we are going to do it manually, which is the more cheaper method, even though tichazotarisira pacheta advantages and disadvantages. Tichaona kuti using manual means it's labor intensive. It can be a slow process, and it cannot work for when we are practicing commercial farming, that is farming for the need of selling. Mapaona. Saka our choice of winnowing depends on the availability of financing and also the amount of produce we want to winnow. Kana uchida kungoita masaga ako 10 awakarima pa chibindu chako, you can use manual means. Asi kana uchida kuita 50 tons of maize, then we have to use automated means. Saka, when we look at winnowing machines, there's something we are going to notice. Winnowing machines use fans. Anditika? Mafeni chaiwo or air blowers to do what? To separate, that is the process of winnowing, to separate the grain from chaff. But if you were paying attention to our previous lesson on winnowing, chaff can be called husk. Saka ma winnowing machines acho anoshandisa mhepo, like they are manually generating wind, either through the use of fans kana kuti air blowers. Saka for winnowing machines we are going to need a source of power, be it battery, electricity, solar, whatever it is. We need a source of power. We trap at the generation of wind by use of fans or air blowers. That's also important to know. Now what we want to consider, takuda kutarisa the process of winnowing. Saka tanga tisana to discuss in our previous lesson, and panapa ndo patichaona the application per grain separation. Saka, what is the process of winnowing? So when it comes to the process of winnowing, per process panapa, we are going to be looking at, we have traditional means, kana kuti a traditional method, then the other thing we have is we have a modern method. Saka we are going to be discussing these two methods separately, a traditional method and a modern method. So we start with the traditional method, ndo yatinotanga nayo, the traditional method. Saka pa traditional method apa, our first step 1, we are going to harvest and thresh. Saka it's harvesting and threshing, that is step number 1. Saka mukaverenga that particular Bible verse, it concerned a threshing floor. And Saka, you should be careful of that, or you should actually know what it is. But we are going to put down a few notes which are going to help us. So the first thing is crops and are threshed. Saka kushona threshing kupura. And kurova nimpini kwa zvinhu musaka, that's threshing. Crops are threshed after they are cut from the field. Saka tinenge takowa, and it cutting from the field dochi ndo harvesting. So after us harvesting, we then have to thresh the crops. Takowa, tapinda munda, tacheka. Let me use example ye chibage. tadaro manje instead of kuchokonyora kuya handiti haungachokonyori zvinhu zvinosadza masaga 200. It's too much labor intensive. It's humanly impossible. So zvinoitwa ndezvekuti kune hama dzangu dzisingazive kumusha, unotora masaga tovatatutira chibage, totora mpinyi torova masaga aya tichibreka like macobs handiti echibage, then chimabreka kudaro manje ndo patinozoti after doing so. Alright, let me put down this point first. Saka point yacho iri kuti chi threshing loosens the grains from the stalks, kana kuti cobs, however you want to put it, and heads. And it saka na chiri chibage ngeri cob, but kuti stalks and heads is just tangositaura generally. Saka threshing kupura kutora chibage or any grain crop mesamsaka motanga kurova nempini muchibreak, and then after doing so we go to step number 2. So this was step number 1. Let us go to step 2. Saka step 2, it's heaping. Kwakuisa mumahipi uku. Very important. This is our step number 2. What is going to happen panapa? Tichati a mixture of grain and husk, kana kuti chaff, is done what? A mixture of grain and husk is collected in a basket or a shovel. Saka tapedza kupura kudaro tichadurura pasi tichisa pasi heap 1 ndozvirongotaurwa with step 2, which is heaping. So after tadurura pasi taisa pasi heap, of course tinogona kutsvaga tende ratinoisa pasi kuitira chibage chedu chisazangana nemavhu. We are going to step number 3. And what happens with the step number 3? With the step number 3, we are going to use, it's using air current. And that's step number 3. Saka air current kana tiri ku traditional method, of course tichashandisa mhepo yakagadzirwa naMwari inoita naturally. Okay, we don't have a machine which can generate this air current. Saka how exactly are we going to do it? Chokutanga, the mixture from the heap what is done with this mixture from the heap? So the mixture from the heap is thrown up and from a certain height. Of course, we don't have to be particular or calculate this height. Kunyangu edu vanhu physics, they might be interested in knowing the optimum height for efficiency, but that's not our concern. So when a mixture from the heap is thrown from a certain height, as it falls, the air current, kana kuti the wind, blows away the lighter chaff, and while the heavier grains fall to the ground. The heavier grains fall almost straight down. Saka it's almost straight down, and once almost for this particular reason. Saka zvinoitika apa ndezvekuti, maybe let me put a picture to explain a little. So looking at this mother of ours who is participating in winnowing, tinoona kuti magrains edu haasi kudonha directly down like this andika, but ari swayed. There is a particular angle yaari kudonha nayo, this angle theta. The reason is panopfuura an air current panapa handitika, panopfuura an air current inototakura even maheavier grains a little. You get it? Yatakura the heavier grains a little, then chaff inobva yaendeswa kuside kunoko. This is the chaff. Ndo zvinongoitika panapa. Saka this is chaff yatakurwa further away, of which magrains edu anongoshiftwa zvishoma. So apapa we are just being more technical because we are learning science, but it's not of much material use. Then from this point, let us now go to the last point. Our last point, which is our step number 4. Step 4, collecting. Saka pa collecting apa tiri kuti the grain from the heap, actually the grain form a new heap near the person performing winnowing. The person performing winnowing, and that is it. The grain will form a new heap near the person performing the winnowing, and lighter chaff or husk gathers in a separate heap. So let me do this. In a separate heap further away. So because the chaff more or less weighs the same, inotakurwa to more or less the same distance away from the winnowing person, so we are going to eventually have 2 new heaps. So the first heap yatawana pa step number 2, kutora kudurura pasi patende most typically, so tinenge tapura. That's the first heap. The second heap manje tunoiwana from the winnowing process, where heavier material, which is the grain, the seeds, fall on the feet of the person who is winnowing, but the husk, the chaff, is carried away a little further to form another heap. So that is the traditional way. Now what we want to focus on is modern winnowing. Saka tichiri pa process modern winnowing. That is what we want to focus on now. So pa modern winnowing, we are not going to put down steps per se, but we are just going to summarize things. So our first point is mechanical winnowing. Kana kuti mechanical winnowers have fans, mafan, not mafans, fans which generate an air current which separates lighter chaff from heavier grain. Saka mechanical winnowers, that is automated winnowing, and modern winnowing tinogona kuiti automated winnowing. We can call it that. Mabona. So modern winnowing, kana uti mechanical automated winnowing, when these winnowers have fans which generate an air current which separates lighter chaff from heavier grain. Our next point, so I think this is more like self-explanatory. Tambotaura about generators anogenerator air current through fans kana kuti air blowers. Saka modern winnowing machines kana kuti modern winnowers, we can put it like that, they can clean, saka they've become more smart and classify a range of grains, including corn, chibage, wheat, I think domunga, rice mchishona ndifunga kuti tinezita mupunga. Then we can also talk about sorghum and soybeans. Saka munogona kutonga harvesta zvese beans, rice, maize mongoisa in a modern smart, a modern smart winnower. Inogona kutokuseparatira kuti chibage choenda kwacho chega, rice kwaro rega, soybeans kwayo yega, then husk nechafu zvichibudawo neoutlet yazo. That's how smart technology has become. So this is all we have to say about modern winnowing. Pari zvino ngatichiendai ku-applications of winnowing, which is more like zvatiri kugadzirira this lesson. So applications of winnowing. Tiri pa applications of winnowing. Our first application, we are looking at separating grains from chaff. Saka this is more like the traditional application, separating grains from chaff. And by now I am sure kuti makuziva the process yacho inoita sei, munoziva the role of the density, different densities. You should also know the role of gravity in all this. Saka panapa tiri kuti farmers use winnowing to clean harvested crops, and just a few examples of these harvested crops like wheat, maize and rice. And this is what farmers do. Winnowing is used to clean the crop, the harvested grain. Then for our number 2, we also use winnowing as a method for doing what? For cleaning food grains. That's a second application, cleaning food grains. What do we mean by cleaning food grains? Saka before grains are sold, satatengesa chibage chedu kana kuti rice kana kuti beans, before grains are sold or even cooked, anditika winnowing kupepeta helps remove dust chairo from chikafu. You can remove it through winnowing, taking the advantage of the grain or the seed being more heavier than the dust. Of course the dust will be carried away by an air current. So removing dust, removing dry leaves and other impurities, cannot other lighter impurities. We should always remember that the physical properties we bank on when we talk about winnowing, kusiyana kweuremu. Cleaning food grains. Separating seeds, number 3. Maseeds acho chaiwo tiri kuti hapana chaff, hapana husk. We just want to separate seeds. We can use the process of winnowing. How do we do this? Different seeds can sometimes be separated using winnowing, but there's a condition which is very important. If and only if inonyorwa so kuscience if and only if they vary in weight and size. Saka we have seeds panapa, and I'm going to use this example. Tine wheat ne maize, we have seeds, cannot grains, and we can separate wheat ne maize tichishandisa winnowing, because wheat seeds cannot grains very lighter than maize grains. So maize grains ndo angachidonera pasi, wheat seeds achitorwa nemhepo achinogadzira another heap tatoseparator. So we can use winnowing for separating seeds, use winnowing for cleaning food grains, use winnowing as it was used in ancient times for separating grains from chaff. Let us now go to the last part of our lesson, which is advantages and disadvantages of winnowing. Very important. Your examiners may want to test on this. Advantages and disadvantages of winnowing, starting of course with advantages. Saka advantage yekutanga inge iri is according to use, but our first advantage tirikuti winnowing is cheap and cost effective. Very cheap, rusero arudhuri, 50 cents ungonatowandisa. So winnowing is cheap and cost effective. Anditi togona wedu wedzera rizeni kumberi, because it can be done manually, kana kuti it can be done by hand or a simple fan. Chiri kunzi fan apa ndochi rusero. Saka hapana angazvipikisa kuti winnowing it's very cheap, cost effective, hazvidhure, rusero harudhure, kana kuti fan yacho iri kutaurwa haidhure zvakare. Now for our second advantage tinogona kuti winnowing improves the quality of grain by removing chaff. Kubvisa chaff kunoto increase the quality of the grain. Muruzona, kuremova chaff kuno increase the quality of the grain. We are also going to see kuti kana varimi vachida kuendesa zvinhu zvavo kuGMB, kuremova chaff kunoita kuti zvisanyanye kurema zvakare, so save again on transportation costs. So that is also another advantage. Saka let us put it down here to save on transportation costs. The weight of grain is reduced. It's quite literal because tabvisa a certain part, which is the chaff and husk, during winnowing. And what does this do? Making transportation cheaper, making transportation easier and cheaper. Saka kana zvinhu zvikasarema zvoreva kuti mota hainyanyi kupisa mafuta ichizvitakura, zoredusa cost yekutozvitakura. Kana cost yekuzvitakura, which is part of production cost, ikareducwa, zvinoreva kuti costs are reduced overly, saka there's more profit. So this is an added advantage to the farmer. Lastly, our last advantage panapa tiri kuti the husk or chaff and it haingoraswe, tinogona kutoishandisa as cattle feed, can be collected and used as cattle feed, kana kuti as more generally animal feed. saka mombe, mbudzi, makwai, huku zvinogona kutodya chafu iyi. Zvototi kana muine huku pamba kumusha pamunenge muchipura nekupepeta, muchatoona huku dzakatoungana ipapo dzichidya the chaff. So the chaff can be collected, the husk can be collected and used as animal feed. How about the disadvantages? Let us now talk about the disadvantages. So when it comes to the disadvantages, of course, ekutanga tatombotaura labor intensity. It is labor intensive. Panoshandwa, especially kana chakatowandisa chibage chacho or magrains atiri kuda kupura. So it's labor intensive and also a slow process. Saka kuti labor intensive nekuti slow process, you can separate it into 2 points, 2 disadvantages. Handiti? But tokufanga kusimbisa panapa kuti when it is done manually, kana tichita nemushini, it's a bit faster, a bit more efficient. So it's labor intensive and a slow process when done manually. Our second disadvantage, it needs good airflow, kana kuti a good air current and wind to function properly. Kana kusina mhepo tichiita this process manually, kureva kuti tichitotemba nemhepo yakasikwa naMwari, tinonetseka zvisingaite. Dzimwe nguva mhepo inenge iri shoma, dzimwe nguva kusitorina, saka tinonetseka apa, because we need air, we need an air current, we need wind, we need good airflow for this process to be done properly. So that's the second disadvantage. Kana kusina mhepo basa rinotombomira. Okay, another disadvantage, it cannot be utilized when can it not be utilized? With heavier particles like stones. Saka inotoda kuti zvacho zvisiyane in weight, in density, but zvivo zvidiki zvese, generally speaking, dust nemaseeds, husk negrain. Kana takudhila nematombo, it's not utilizable because dombo riri heavier se zvakaita grain, saka rinongodonhawo panodonhawo grain. Saka zviri kubviswa zvacho zvinofanirwa kuva lighter in weight and density to the grain or the seed. Kana zviri kuda kubviswa like matombo zvikava ne greater or equal weight to the grain, it's not effective, it cannot be utilized. Saka kana chibage chedu chine zvimatombo tombo haishandi, kutozviita hand pick or totsvaga amwe methods of separation. Another disadvantage, winnowing can only be done in particular climates. That's a disadvantage. Winnowing can only be done in particular climates since it needs wind. And saka kana kutori climate, generally speaking, isina mhepo, you cannot practice winnowing there. And if you do your geography, you'll find out kune nzvimbo, generally speaking, dzisina mhepo. Saka winnowing haitoshandiswi as a method of separation munzvimbo idzodzo, unless vachishandisa automated modern winnowing where they use machines. Our next disadvantage, inoti winnowing machines now, there are not all advantages for my winnowing machines. So winnowing machines are more expensive. Nekuti anodhura hatengeki, therefore increasing the cost of production. Saka zvinobva zvaita kuti the cost of production or the cost of producing maize idure. Winnowing machines are more expensive, increasing the cost of producing or the cost of production, and it increases the cost of the process. Then pekupedzisira, winnowing can harm or lose grain if it is not done properly. Nogona kutokanganisa magrains acho kuti maita harm or actually lose them, and this reduces crop yields. Mapaona, this reduces crop yields. So these are the advantages and disadvantages of winnowing. Taita winnowing when it comes to grain separation, which was more like a revision of what we did already. Saka pakungosimbisa because our syllabus requires that we also do applications of these separation methods. So if you want to ask any question pertaining this lesson or any question in general, you can ask us in the comments or on our direct numbers. If you want extra lessons, you can also contact us on WhatsApp on our direct numbers. The number is this. Saka +263 is the Zimbabwean code 715213310. Vari muZimbabwe, be free to just say 071-521-3310. Thank you and take care.